Now we'll start over.
Hello and welcome to the Hubba's House podcast program from Wasta, South Dakota, population 90 or so. I am Hubba. My real name is Matthew J. Trask. I am joined today by Republican gubernatorial candidate Scott Munsterman of Brookings, South Dakota. Scott, it's nice to see you.
It's good to see you, Matt.
You bet. And we're down here in Wasta. In ways which we'll get to in the interview. Wasta is the perfect place to hold an interview with Scott Munsterman. Wasta experienced a boom during the railroad age and never really came back after the interstate came through. Even though Wasta is on the interstate, it could never find a way to recoup its loss from the railroad business, and the school closed in the 50s. And Wasta, although it's a charming little community and somewhat of a bedroom community, and I've always found that to be a dirty phrase, but it doesn't mean that. Anyway, we're getting along here okay. We got the Dixie Diner and the Wasta Bar, but, we could use revitalization, which is what your campaign is all about.
That's right, Matt.
Yeah. Let's do some easy questions. You have been the mayor of Brookings, South Dakota.
That's right. Couple terms.
2 terms as the mayor in Brookings, South Dakota. You told me you're originally from Morris, Minnesota.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. And a goofy question, because we like to have fun here. You have a wife, Mary Jean, and 5 daughters.
You've done your homework.
Well, I tried. Did living in a house with 6 women accustom you to opposition?
Yes, it did.
I prepared for this interview by going to munstermanforgovernor.com and receiving this book, which is available as a free download. Pretty much outlining your plans, Scott, for the future of South Dakota. Incidentally, it could be used whether or not you became governor.
That's right.
Yeah, it's really, giving the people the power to do. And the free download of the book and his tone, everything about it reminded me of a book called The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman. Have you read that?
Yeah, I have.
And I found that book to be very interesting, and it is one of the reasons I'm doing this website, But you definitely espouse his vision for the future. And something else that hadn't happened when he wrote that book was we had a recession, almost a depression. And so the point of this book is that we're sitting on go here in South Dakota, but we just need to make the right choices to go forward. Exactly. You want to go on? I'm hogging this thing.
No, that's great. It's great to talk to people like you, Matt, that have really taken the time to study the thoughts and the preparation that's went into this book. I didn't enter this decision lightly at all. I was about 3 years ago. I was convicted, and I had a conviction 8 years ago to run for city office in Brookings. I've been in small business for 25 years, healthcare provider for 25 years, and I acted on that conviction. And 3 years ago, I felt that same conviction to be your next governor. But it took me a year before I acted on it. And so about 2 years ago, I decided I better figure out why I need to do this, or that I'm supposed to do this, and I spent the last 2 years researching it out, ideas and thoughts and my experience in small business and healthcare and as a mayor of a community, and that's what really went into this piece of work here. And so what you've been able to pull out of it and really summarize within just a few short moments is you're exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a great future in South Dakota, but we have to have good, strong leadership, and we have to have a plan that's going to bring us there.
I especially liked you're against forced consolidation of schools, but you did suggest voluntary consolidation of resources.
Yes.
Which is a somewhat novel idea. I mean, it's been used, but no one's really set it forward. We have combined sports teams. Wall and Phillip have a combined, and Kadoka have a combined wrestling team and things like that. You almost want us to go back to the frontier mentality to solve some of these problems. And, really, there's nothing new in this book, but there doesn't have to be. We just need a recommitment to old themes, don't we?
Yes, we do.
In some ways.
Yes, we do.
I encourage everyone to read this book. Now, thankfully, gubernatorial back and forth has been to a minimum so far, because we're not really in the nitty-gritty of it yet. But I noticed on a blog the other day you had made a comment somewhere lamenting the fact that we used $71 million from the federal government to balance our budget, and liberal blogger and my personal friend Corey Heidelberger jumped at the opportunity to say, well, Scott, where would you have gotten that $71 million? Now, in this book, Vision for South Dakota, you mentioned that when you first became mayor in Brookings in 2001, Brookings had what you call a structural deficit. It had been using borrowed money and getting itself upside down, something like that, during a time of recession. And your board voted not to use
reserve money.
Reserve money, thank you. And you looked at where your money was being spent, treated the government of Brookings as a business, turning over a profit. Perhaps you can answer Corey today, because you were relating that to the state. Did you find any inefficiencies in the city government? And secondly, did anyone miss the money that you didn't spend?
Yes and no, for the most part.
Really?
Now the first answer is that anytime that you take a hard look, whether it's a business or, or any operation of an organization, and you're faced with overruns, the first thing that you have to do is you have to set the price of government, or set the price of that organization. What I mean by that, Matt, is that we have to say we only have so much money, whatever that number is. And what we did in the city of Brookings is that we couldn't predict what the future was going to be, increases or not. And so we went back 2 years to what those actual revenue numbers were. And that's what we set the price of government at. And that's what we said we weren't going to spend past that point. We set policy, no use of one-time money or reserves for ongoing expenses. It's like pulling out of your savings account to live on. You can't do that very long, and the state's been doing that, as you know, for the last 7 years, going on 8 years now. And the other thing that we said is that we weren't going to grow the rate of growth of government past the consumer price index. And so we set those two things into play immediately at that point in time. And the product of that has been the last 5 years of significant surplus budgets for the city of Brookings that we have been able to strategically invest in the community so that the community could grow. Now let's talk about back in 01, what happened. What we did is we went through and we benchmarked ourselves and compared ourselves to other communities like ours with the types of services that we have. Then we also started to measure our performance of our different departments to make sure that what we were doing was what we had set out to do in the first place. And when you go through that analysis and zero down the budget to basically zero and build it from there in these departments, then you figure out what is the most important thing. It rises to the top. What the priorities are rise to the top. And so that's where you're able to make your priority decisions from once you're in office and you're able to do that. But you have to have the mentality and the hard-headedness, I call it, to be able to sit down and say, nope, the price of government is X, and that's where we're going to start. And we're not going to raise taxes. We're not going to cause any more burden on the people of the state that we already have, because it's tough times, Matt. We can't have that. And so we have to be very judicious on how we use the money that we do have. Now, there were programs that got cut. But you know what? If you went back and asked the people on the street of Brookings today, back 7, 8 years ago, and asked them, well, did you miss anything? They'd probably look at you like, what are you talking about? Because they wouldn't. I mean, they didn't realize or didn't come to them. There's always going to be some programs that we're going to have to say no to, and that group of people will be affected.
And in an outsider, are we getting close on time? Okay. We're going to do a part 2. Hopefully rather short, but from Hubba's house, I am Hubba. Thank you, Scott, for joining me. And from Wasta, South Dakota, thank you, Don Munsterman, for filming me. I am Hubba. Thanks for visiting. Push the